Rodney Hide. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Wallace.
Good morning to you. And Selwyn Manning, good morning to you.
Good morning, Wallace.
How are you this morning,
Yeah,
Selwyn?
very good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
good to have you on. I've just been interested in reading your opinion piece here, Rodney. Sign up, ye gullible and trusting, quoting, "This is wacky stuff. Colin Craig is inclined to believe that Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, but won't rain on the parade of those who think the entire man going to the moon thing is a government hoax." Selwyn, first, do you believe that mankind actually got through the Van Allen belt and went to the moon?
Well, absolutely.
Yes, no.
No, it's a definite yes on this one, Rodney. I'm not going to put my credentials forward for the Conservative Party.
You do feel like a conspiracist sometimes, Selwyn.
Not at all. Not at all. That was the other side of the ledger when I used to work for Scoot, not me. No, with this, I mean, I was lucky enough to be born to remember getting up in the early hours of the morning at different times to watch those Apollo things, and I don't know, it would be like all of my childhood's ambitions to be an astronaut put into the ditch. I actually got a pilot's license on the back of wanting to be an astronaut when I was in my late teens and early 20s.
You got a pilot's license?
Yeah, fantastic kind of era. And putting all of that personal thing aside, I think Rodney's piece there is actually a blinder. I think it's a fantastic piece in the sense that you can see actors still living and breathing in an opposition sense there, Rodney, I think.
Yeah. I'm surprised though, Rodney, actually, one of the longest Facebook posts I have ever had, apart from fluoride, which broke all records, is Colin Craig, and a lot of people actually said, Wallace, don't knock him. I actually wasn't knocking him, but don't take the mick out of him because we're for him. We're going to vote for him.
I think that's true. I think there's a big potential vote for a Conservative Party.
I was amazed.
And a Christian Party also, I think, in New Zealand. I think a Conservative Party would get a bigger vote than a Christian Party, but a Christian Party, they're typically scored 2 or 3%. But, if you look at New Zealand politics, it's sort of leaped ahead where a lot of people are in terms of gay marriage and civil unions and the likes, making legal soliciting, so on and so forth. So I suspect that there would be a vote for it, but of course this guy is wacky. And,
Does that matter though?
It does,
right?
Because it matters to me, because the idea of someone, I don't mind people in politics, that disagree with me. Gosh, that's the state of my life because, I'm so out there. But to be wacky is dangerous. And here's a guy, don't forget what happened here. Radio Live, he went on with Sean Plunkett and he ran the whole line about chemtrails and maybe not, man walked on the moon. The next week, having reflected on it, he went on with Marcus Lush and said the same things. So that to me was extraordinary. And I mean, that's nothing to do with, what a Conservative Party should be standing for. This is all about Colin Craig and his wacky ideas.
Well, I mean, I'm just talking about this Facebook thread where I actually got personal emails saying that no one cares about the wacky. It's all about what he represents. He can say, in terms of his personality or personal stuff, he can think whatever he likes, Selwyn. But what do you think?
I think that's all fine and dandy, but when you're actually leading a party into a position that may take seats in Parliament, it raises up a different kind of question here. Also, I thought Campbell Live did a good job of testing. It's not scientific, but testing just by way of vox pop in the Epsom electorate, etc. And so you saw a cross thing there where some people are saying, no, it doesn't matter relating to the vote even, but there were others who were saying, yes, it certainly does. So this is not a situation building up like it was last time where Epsom was going to, people of Epsom were obviously going to give ACT another tick, irrespective of its candidate last time not actually having a connection to its constituencies as such. But this next time, I doubt that will happen. I think, though, what is coming to head here is clearly that the Conservative Party is becoming more and more relevant as ACT is having a real struggle. And obviously there are people out there that are thinking, is ACT able to resurrect itself? Is the brand damaged beyond recognition, beyond salvage? Are people like Rodney Hide, who's on the other side of this discussion today, seriously going to have a look at becoming leader again, or is it a new breed that is going to try and resurrect that party? Those are questions that are out there that really categorically haven't been put to bed yet.
And very, very big questions. And you are here, Rodney, and we have talked before, haven't we, about this 2 days ago, and you said to me, never say never when it comes to putting your hand up to be leader of the ACT Party again. What are your, now that you've gone to bed and had a Milo and thought about it, what are your thoughts now about leading the ACT Party? Because a lot of people do want you to be part of it again.
Well, it's very flattering, but, I do think it's time for a younger generation to come up. And the reality is I don't think I could get the passion and the energy and that you need, actually, to, do the job. And I think that's what happens to, when you do a job like that you actually have a run, you give it everything that you've got. I didn't want to leave. I was very disappointed to leave Parliament because I loved it.
You didn't want to leave?
Oh, gosh, no. And but you sort of move out and then you remake your life and you're getting on with it. And I'm very reluctant to go back, although I do say never.
Yeah. There'd be certain conditions around that, perhaps, Rodney, to make you...
No, it's a personal thing.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if I'm going to do something, especially politics, it drains you. It takes, look, I've got admiration for every parliamentarian because the effort required is huge.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think people appreciate it, particularly for a minister too. And you're running an electorate, particularly if you're in a small party, you're all over the country. And now what I find for the last, couple of years, an 8-hour day is a big day.
Yeah.
You wake up in the morning with your kids and you're thinking, gosh, I really value this.
One of the other things that kind of hits here too is that, it seems odd having this discussion with Rodney here because a lot of it involves him, obviously, but, you've got a person there like Rodney Hide who's saying we never say never, but it would be more advantageous for him personally, etc., what he's saying for another person, a new wave to come in. Then there's the factor of a party that needs salvaging, needing a person who's got household name appeal, who's got track record of leadership, etc., who mapped out the constituency electorate kind of dynamics in Epsom potentially. And that's the areas, I think, where a lot of people, even outside the ACT fold, myself included, say it makes sense if they were trying to actually get someone like Rodney Hide there. But then again, the party, since the takeover by the Conservatives and the National Party, if you like, with John Banks, it basically deconstructed the party. And I think everybody can see that it is no longer that reformist party that sat there, that was able to take policies forward and had a purpose. And people outside that political bent would be able to say, well, we know where the ideas and the people are contained without a party like ACT. And albeit, there's another right-wing party being discussed at the moment, with Matthew Hooton's name being put around. But you don't know where these people will be. Are they going to go back into the National Party in droves, or is it going to disintegrate and be from outside? It's a complete meltdown.
And it's absolutely fascinating. What do you make of that, Rodney? If ACT wasn't around, another, I guess, libertarian-style group to come in and take up that vacuum space with someone like Matthew Hooton, what would you make of that?
I don't believe for a second he could do it. And the reason is there's only been one political party thus far to get into Parliament under its own steam from outside, and that's been ACT. And I know what that took. It took the excitement and the enthusiasm of the first MMP election and a huge disappointment with the Bolger-led government in terms of its, policy direction. So we had everything going for us, and we only just made it. And it's one thing to be a political expert and to be a political commentator, but it's another thing to actually do the organisation and to actually go door-to-door knocking and to be talking to people. And the thing that I've observed, the most desperate requirement for politics is to be personable.
Right.
And, John Key is naturally personable. Helen Clark had to go and learn it. And she learned it very, very well. So she became fabulously personable person. I always enjoyed her company. And so, it's those sort of things that when you're looking on the outside, you don't see it, and you've got to be able to, in Epsom, you have to be able to get 200 people to give up their days and their nights to work for you. Now, that's a big requirement. On my part, I'd love to see a free market party, a party that talked about personal responsibility and left government. Because, what I feel sick about in New Zealand is that every little problem that there is that comes up, everyone expects government to do something, and every time government does something, 9 times out of 10, it makes it worse. And, the real resource in New Zealand is people. And people using their own initiative, people doing their own thing, people doing community projects, people doing small business. And that's what we don't emphasise enough. Everything in New Zealand in terms of commentary and political commentary is all about the top telling the rest of us how to do things.
Rodney, that sounds like leadership talk to me.
I was thinking that myself. I was thinking that's an act speech.
That never say never. That
never
must be
say,
starting to stretch
Rodney,
out of it.
you've got it, boy.
I take it back.
That certainly sounds like your first speech for the ACT Party leadership.
We're ticking the boxes here. Household name, track record.
20 minutes past 8 o'clock.
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll say that Selwyn Manning endorses me, and that should see me.
Oh, you'll be sweet then, mate.
That would be a beautiful tweet. Thousands lose their jobs in 90-day trial. Tens of thousands of workers have been sacked under the 90-day trial period. Many let go because they did not fit in, quote unquote. What do you think about this? Is this a vindication, perhaps, Selwyn, that these controversial hire and fire laws haven't been working, or are they working as intended?
Well, I'd like to think the former, in the sense that, with this particular law, there was always opportunity for those scumbag employers to exploit the liberty that they had within the policy, meaning that if they thought, okay, well, we can get people in for 90 days, we're not going to put anything into them, we just want their labour, and then flick them off, they're at a cheaper rate perhaps than what they would be after that period, we'll get someone else in for that. I mean, in those figures and stats that you're citing there isn't an explanation on such things to back up where suspicions lie. That to me was a vulnerability in the law that needed work. I think that with all of this, there's also the opportunity for an employer to, if someone was really, really wrong for the job,
precisely,
to do something about that.
And that really happens. I mean, I've talked to I've talked to employers themselves go, I can't get the right people.
And in some ways, it gives a confidence to the employer to be able to take someone on in times where the economy is not very good, or their own markets, or what their services or product, they're not that stable. So there's all the pros and cons on this, but clearly, and my bent is always to look at the impact of such policies, and where impact of policies is producing numbers that have been expelled from opportunity here, up around the 18,000, etc., over that period of time, then there's alarm bells ringing, and I think some really serious look at this to do something about getting fairness for both sides.
Rodney, I was quite surprised by the high turnover of people. I mean, I was quite...
I'm responsible for this, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Rodney.
Because the National Party had it as 90 days for bigger businesses, and I was able to get it pushed out to every business. And yes, I am surprised by it. Here's my take on it. Tens of thousands have got jobs under this law, and thousands have lost jobs under this law. So these are people that, particularly young people, that quite possibly wouldn't have been offered a job in the first place, and then subsequently have some of them, not all of them, of course, as I said, tens of thousands have got jobs under this law. Some of them have not worked out. Now, what are the reasons for that? Well, we don't know, but here's the sort of propositions, isn't it? One is that actually the guy was exploiting them, but actually in business, if you've got a good worker, you don't want to lose them, in my observation of going around businesses. Second of all...
Well, that's what we think. I guess I'm asking, are you sorry then for what you've done?
No, not at all, because I look at it, it's the headline that's wrong. It should be tens of thousands got jobs, some didn't work out, and that's life. And the difficulty, well, that's absolutely true, because you can't have a job unless someone in a business offers you one.
18,000 people lost their jobs in the first 3 months of employment last year. The actual figure likely to be a lot higher. I mean, to me, those those figures sound surprisingly high.
Yeah, with this type of thing, I think, there's obviously there's a lack of information around it. We're basing our responses on supposition.
Sure.
But what it's crying out for is solutions to tidy this up so it's right for everybody, if that is possible. My idea is a real simple one. In that 90-day period, if a worker is brought in and they know that at the end of that 90-day period, they're going to get a certificate or something like that's endorsed or controlled by a government entity, even if it's through the Department of Labour or something like that, where they've met appraisal points, their punctuality, etc., etc. They get ticked on the way through, and they've got something in their hands as a worker that can, if they get flicked off, at least they've got that there. They might not have fitted in.
Rodney, briefly, that's not a bad caveat.
No, the problem though is this, and I think you're being a bit loose with the figures, Wallace. If you read the figures, it shows that 69,000 businesses took on new employees in the year.
Yes.
So, of course, it's under the legislation because the legislation applies to every new employee. What we do know is that 27% of employees said that they fired at least one new employee during the time of that trial. So, 69,000 people, being employed, that's the figure to be focusing on. Here, I think, is the problem, and I don't know the answer to this, and it's been my job for the last 6 months to go around significant number of small businesses in Christchurch.
Right.
And to go back repeatedly, and you get to know them. Two things that I've observed. One is they have recently had to lay staff off because of, the earthquake and the downturn, and they're very reluctant, even though they are working overtime and busy, to be employing new people because, they've got an uncertain future. Second thing is, when they do decide to employ people, they absolutely struggle. And I am amazed at the number of businesses that have told me they will not employ New Zealanders.
Well, yeah. First, I wanted to pick up on what you were saying there, Rodney, because it was quite interesting. Small employers in Christchurch saying to you that they didn't necessarily want to employ New Zealanders.
No.
Tell us.
I visited, actually it was a rather large industry,
right.
heavy machinery, and they would employ 170 people.
Yeah.
And a third of their staff were brought in from overseas, and they said that they'd love to employ locals because there they are, they're battling actually on a world stage trying to export products.
Yeah.
But they said they couldn't, they were too unreliable, and the big problem was the drugs because they required to drug test under OSH, and it costs them a lot to drug test them, and they don't pass.
That is just amazing.
It was astonishing to me. This was 170 people, and I kid you not, the manager was showing me, walked right through their floor, and a third of their staff were from overseas. They flew them in, sent them home at Christmas for a break, and eventually these people become New Zealanders.
They paid the same?
Yes.
That's just incredible. I might bring that up throughout the week, actually. Is it something in particular with Christchurch, perhaps the stress in resorting to drugs, or what is it?
I have to say that particular example was the most extreme one that I've come across, but they had made a calculated decision. Actually, the guy that was a manager used to be a student of mine. I hadn't realised, so I knew him. And, he was heartbroken by the turn of affairs.
Yeah.
And, people wouldn't they'd employ someone, they'd turn up on Monday, not turn up Tuesday, be there Wednesday, not be there Thursday and Friday. They'd say to them, we're going to drug test you. No, that'll be fine. They drug test them and they're positive.
My gosh. We might bring that up during the week. Let's talk about the passing of Nelson Mandela Selwyn. I mean, we expected it, didn't we? But it still comes as quite a shock when it does happen. I mean, suddenly, as David Cameron says, a great light has gone out in the world.
Yeah, that's true.
What are your reflections on him?
Reflections, one of hope. We'd obviously, like millions of others, we'd heard of Nelson Mandela long before he was released from Robben Island, but his name, in my view, was always synonymous with others that didn't quite make it through in their lives, like Steve Biko.
Absolutely.
And many others at Robben Island that didn't make it either. And there was a really good piece that brought it home on the weekend, written by Patrick Smelly, and it was republished in the New Zealand Herald. And he said when he met Mandela in Wellington, when he was chair of the press gallery, what stood out to him was his huge, gnarly hands that showed all those years of working in the quarries and the hard labour on Robben Island. So, you know, those kind of things really stand out. I think many will look in the future back and think, okay, how did Mandela transform South Africa? There will be many that criticise the economics, that, you know, spreading the opportunities out across the populations was not achieved under his lifetime, certainly under his rule. But certainly right around the world, I think, you know, we've been bereft of significant moral-based leaders, and he stood out amongst those few.
I'm glad you brought up those hands, those small things that you read and you notice, because one thing that stood out to me, amazing really, was Trevor Richards' Holt or Racist Tour, talking about Nelson Mandela when he met him, and Nelson said, "I'd love to write you a note." Of thanks, I guess. So they had a white piece of paper on the tablecloth, and here Nelson Mandela is writing on the tablecloth. He didn't see where the white ended, and his eyes were pretty much shot because of 20 plus years working in a limestone quarry. But I mean, the hardships were extraordinary, Rodney.
Oh, it's an extraordinary tale, and of course he was a big man with a big vision and a big idea who held to it. And of course his passing is a time to reflect and wonder at all of that, but also too it's like an era for us, isn't it? Yeah. Because apartheid was a big thing in the world, but it was especially big in New Zealand.
Yes.
In terms of its political effect and the thinking and the debate. And Nelson Mandela was a part of that debate. And then we've gone through this huge transition. And then this man passes, and you sort of have a sense it's an era, you know? And you feel sorry for our kids in a way that who would they look up to now in the same way that we could look up to for a person, to me, who had that recognition of the importance of the individual and of forgiveness, that he was prepared to, at a personal level, forgive his tormentors and his imprisoners for the good of society and for the country. And I think everyone, you couldn't help but be humbled by that, could you?
I was just thinking, I don't know if I'd have the moral strength to forgive him. And I was just reading about what happened to him in Robben Island. Selwyn, he was only allowed 1 half-hour visit by a friend a year.
I mean, what can you say to that? It's a demonstration, really, of the regime that was in control of South Africa
at that
isn't
time.
It? And Mandela was big enough, perhaps, for them to allow him to survive those years. I think also his contribution as a figurehead and a leader to us in New Zealand, Mandela and all of these people, Desmond Tutu and all of these others became household names here, of course. And what it did is it drew the very best, in my view, of New Zealand society out, and it drew and exposed the very worst of New Zealand societies too. And I think, you know, whenever we see an era pass like this, particularly with someone like Nelson Mandela, we do reflect back to the 1980s. I was in a factory at that time, and it was divided. There's been writing in the papers this weekend about how it was divided. And it was, you know, you would sit there at Smoko Room, and it would be pro-tour and anti-tour groups in the Smoko Room. There was 65 men. Yeah, these are guys that had come off Mangere Bridge, you know, real hard guys, and et cetera, et cetera. That's how it was. It was polarised, and New Zealand was polarised, and I think we've grown significantly in those ways as a nation, and I think those challenges and reflection help us to do so. But it surprises me, and I do shake my head about the people that are right at the front of the queue wanting to go over and pay respects here. And one would like to think that the likes of Trevor Richards, John Minto and Dick Cuthbert, for example, could represent all of those thousands of New Zealanders by being assisted to go over as well.
Yeah, what do you reckon about that, Rodney? Do you think that people like John Minto and Trevor Richards should be part of or even spearhead the delegation to go over to South Africa?
Oh, it wouldn't bother me. Is the government going to send people over other than, you know, elected representatives? I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know what the thinking is. I imagine it's going to be a big affair. You know, I think the difficulty that a government would have with the likes of a John Minto is he's gone on to other things. And of course, you can't separate the two out, can you? And I mean, whatever you may think of the various issues, apartheid versus asset sales, here's John Minto attacking the government vociferously, high up in the Mana Party. So it's much more difficult for a government of the day to give him a platform in that regard, irrespective of his role in helping shape a nation's views on apartheid.
What about this one here, Selwyn? Norwegian oil giant Statoil and Australia's biggest independent oil company, Woodside, joining the hunt for oil and gas in New Zealand, part of a block offer. They want to run a permit that goes, to put a rig into water going down around about 2,500 metres, so a lot deeper than Anadarko's deep water exploration. Where do you stand on this? Do you have concerns around this?
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, I think, even Simon Bridges, no doubt, has concerns about the risks around this, and that's where it really comes in. Is New Zealand's going to be bombarded by these opportunities here, and I do put a line under opportunity from multinationals coming over. I'm not yet satisfied that New Zealand, if the oil is found in these explorations, is going to get a good bang for its buck. Put that there. The other aspect is that I do not see a readiness to respond in any meaningful way should things go awry. And remember, the risk factor goes up by huge percentages the deeper you go down. And then there are all of those, even from a political public mood point of view, the thousands and thousands and thousands of New Zealanders who are saying, we're not satisfied that those questions, those concerns are being addressed, one, by government, and secondly, by the information we're getting through from even the providers of, the explorers here. So all of those kind of things, I think, have to be addressed by government right now, and they certainly in the next year. If New Zealand gets those kind of things right, there are huge opportunities.
Well, I mean, money, and it can, straight hard cash.
And it can also, if it gets it right, legislation-wise, it can export that framework, that legislation, to the other countries in Melanesia if they so choose to, and in other places that they're getting bombarded too, and they're more advanced than New Zealand in being the recipients of exploration efforts.
Yes.
So New Zealand, yes. I think, can position itself Pacific-wide, Melanesia-wide, Western Pacific kind of specifically here, to really be significant in getting things right, if it can get things right here.
Rodney, as the low-hanging fruit of oil and gas gets tapped out, with those giant wells in the Middle East, you're seeing this, aren't you, across the world, where people are going, explorers are going further out, going into deeper waters. So what Selwyn says, we are going to be the recipient of a lot more exploration, does tap into concerns that we have about what if something went wrong. And this here, 2.5 k's deep, that's a biggie.
I love it. There you go. I love it. I love it that we're doing this. And understand, look, we're just looking for the stuff, and it's important to know it's there. And as for low-hanging fruit, people are ruling out the huge technological advance that's occurred in drilling and mining and exploration, so that this stuff that we're looking for and drilling now, in a funny way, it's safer and less risk than what would have probably been drilling on land 40 years ago, So it's been a huge development.
I just can't see that. I can't see how a drill going to 2.5...
Of course you're not, because you've got a very fixed view of the world. And you don't, I challenge you to put your hand up and go out and have a look at one of these rigs. It's fantastic stuff.
Rodney, I can smell the money on your breath as you lean toward that microphone.
Well, it's not about money. It's actually about the utilisation and the use of resources that the whole world benefits from. And we support a population in the world today of 7 billion people, and it's on the back of industry, which is on the back of the petrochemical industry.
Yeah. Now,
and so it's very, very important that, we figure out where these resources are. It's very important that we figure out geology. Some of these are seismic surveys, for goodness sake. Where's the risk in doing a seismic survey?
Oh, it's very important in getting that seismic surveys done right. Yeah. But I think, where it boils down to, New Zealand's economic zone is huge. And so we are going to be inundated. So we have to work out as a country, irrespective of what party is in Parliament or in government,
and irrespective of the climate change issue as well, which is the longer conversation, isn't it?
It is. But New Zealand here if it has an opportunity of getting it right, minimising those risks. You know, like if you look at the risks on the ones around like Taranaki, close to shore, the risk factor may come in at around about 10% risk over a particular time in the particular volumes. With this type of thing, you're getting up, and some will say it's even more, but some conservatively put it at like 70% risk over a particular time and a particular volume being taken.
Apparently this is not called deep sea drilling. This is ultra deep sea drilling, and that's quite dangerous.
Yeah, but my factors here is that at 10% risk, you can manage that risk. You can identify the risks. When you're starting to get up bigger...
70% risk of what?
Yeah, well, exactly, Rodney. You know, there's not a lot of information coming out of Simon Bridges' office on the risk aspect. Well, there's not enough because it doesn't address those issues there. That 70%
risk factor included someone stubbing their toe.
Yeah, but the fact is that you cannot manage successfully an environmental impact on 70%. There is something that's going to catch you out.
The 70% included literally someone stubbing their toe.
Well, let's put a bandage around that toe and start minimising the risk. The fact is if the risks can be minimised down to a satisfactory level, then go for it. But if not, then you're open.
But understand this, you know, life is a risky project. You know, it's a risky prospect. You can never eliminate risk. You know, you can manage it. You can deal with it, but if you go over the top, you know, I'm working in a business now, and our motto is safety third, right?
Safety third.
Yes, because everywhere you walk around in Christchurch, they have these big signs up saying safety first, and it's absurd, isn't it? Because if you put safety first, you wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. It'd be too risky. So obviously safety has to be balanced against other things that you're trying to do. It can't be the first thing.
With the deep sea drilling, what comes in safety's third, what's second and what's first?
No, I'm talking about our particular business, but what I'm saying is you cannot rule out a whole industry or a whole business because something might happen.
No, we're talking a proportion of risk here, and it does need to be addressed. No, but you're talking nonsense
statistics because, as I said to you, the 70%, everyone thinks, oh gosh, there's 70% of oil washing up on a beach. No, 70% chance including someone stubbing their toe.
Look, I tell you what, I went to a geotech conference a couple of weeks ago and they didn't know anything about the deep sea drilling, the issue, and I was talking to them about this because they were soil drillers in Christchurch, and they said, what sort of drilling is it, mate? And I said, well, it's drilling 1.5 Ks in water. And they goes, yes. Because they both went, ooh, wow. And they didn't say it was risky, but they said, that's a pretty big drill. That's a pretty big drilling.
Of course it is. You're comparing apples with oranges. I mean, I was drilling 30,000 feet, you know, on a rig, and 400 feet, you know, 30 years ago. I mean, when you're drilling for oil, you go down 30,000 feet. It's not like doing a geotech test on the Canterbury Plains to put a building or a bridge up.
Were you on an oil rig, Rodney?
Yes. And I worked on the Ninian Central, which was well north of the Shetland Islands, and it was a concrete structure. It sat on the floor. It was a production platform. We had 30 wells down. We were still drilling, and the other rigs around us were sending the oil in, and we were pumping it into the Shetlands, and it had 350 men on it, and the thing weighed. It was the biggest man-made movable structure, and I think it still is, because they poured it in concrete and floated it out there. And you know that thing weighed 650,000 tonnes.
My goodness me.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
But it was fabulous technology. And then I worked in the Shetlands. I worked at Selwyn, which was a gas stripping plant that was built there with 7,000 men. And we were building a gas stripping plant because at that stage they were accessing only the oil and they wanted to be able to access the gas. And so they built a pipeline into the Shetlands, not just for oil but for gas, and then stripped it at Selwyn.
So you would have had unique insight then and complete shock when the Deepwater Horizon gas leak happened, the oil leak happened.
Oh, sure. And I mean, we always knew it was risky, but the thing that fascinated me was how safety conscious everyone was, because you're sitting on an oil rig. We had deaths, none on the rigs that I was on, thank goodness. We had it in the construction job that I was on, but, you were well conscious when someone got hurt or was killed, because the sea was wild. This is wild sea, the North Sea, very cold, and here you are sitting on this little platform with the wind, howling at what felt like 1,000,000 miles an hour straight off the Arctic. So, and choppers mightn't come in for 3 or 4 days. So you very much felt it. And so safety was a big issue. And, I just can't imagine working on a rig. And again, I don't want to make a political point, but it's just from a technical point of view, with the idea of protesters wanting to clamber over it. You just can't imagine anything more frightening to the rig workers.
Well, once again, nostalgia is
seconds.
a fantastic thing, but let's get something like this absolutely right. Manage those risks that do exist, and put that information out there to satisfy the public mood. The public mood is not satisfied at this time.
Very good. Hey, Selwyn Manning, thank you for joining us this morning. Good to see you here again. Good. Rodney Hide, always a pleasure. Thanks